Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So today being Thursday, as we had announced earlier, we will be taking up Swami Vivekananda's life as written by his one of his chief disciples, Sister Nivedita, the master as I saw him. So we will be alternating between Master as I saw him, which is the biography of Swami Vivekananda written by Sister Nivedita on one of the Thursdays, and on the next Thursday, that is alternate Thursday, we will be discussing Raj Yoga. So Thursday is dedicated to Swami Vivekananda, just as Tuesday we are dedicating to the Holy Mother, Holy Mother's Divine Play. On one Tuesday, on the alternate Tuesday, we'll be having the Gospel of Holy Mother. So also on Saturday, uh, we will be having Bhagavad Gita on one Saturday, that is at 5:45 p.m. and 7 o'clock. We'll be having Vedanta and the Science of Human Resources, that is on Saturday. And Sunday, as announced earlier, we will have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, alternately. So now coming to the Master as I saw him, from where we left, we were discussing a chapter, the second visit of Swami Vivekananda to England. The first visit, the reminiscences of the first visit, we had discussed in our previous classes. And in the second visit, which was in 1896, as I said, Swamiji visited England 3 times. And altogether, he stayed here for a total of 297 days, to be precise. So around the first visit, and this was the second visit, which was the longest in terms of months. He stayed here several months. And this was his main visit to England, where he wanted to prepare the ground for the future of the Vedanta movement in England. And he had, as he had mentioned, we have discussed this, Swami Vivekananda believed, or he felt, that to establish the work in London especially and England in general would be a great achievement, because in those days England had colonized almost so many nations. That is when Swamiji came here in 1895 and 1896. So they were still the colonial masters, and English language had spread all over these nations, different nations of the world, because of this colonization by England, by UK, the British over so many countries, some African countries, Asian countries, and several countries were colonized by the British. And Swamiji felt, though Swamiji did not involve himself in politics, because he believed that truth is the only politics he believed in. He did not believe in any other politics. So whether the British ruled, as he pointed out in one of his talks, that whether the Mughals ruled India, or the Hindu kings, or the Buddhists ruled, there were a few Buddhist kings as well, who later on converted to Buddhism and ruled India. So whether it was the Buddhist or the Hindu or the Muslim or the Mughal rulers, or after that the English, whoever ruled India politically, the culture and the spiritual core of India remained intact. That is what Sister Nivedita pointed out in her first chapter. So she was wondering what made India survive as a nation, whereas most of the nations of the world, which were political units, geographical units, they keep on changing, no doubt. But the culture also keeps changing. For example, Persia was once upon a time a great Zoroastrian nation. So the Parsis are not to be found anywhere. They are found in Persia right now, it has become Iran. So along with the political conquest, along with the changes in the political and the geographical uh, size of the country, or maybe the political masters, the culture also changed. Whereas in India, no matter how many cultures, how many political masters India had, the geographical uh, geographical entity known as Bharat or India, the size has kept on changing. During Ashoka, the empire was quite big. It included many parts of the now present day Afghanistan, the Maurya kingdom. So whoever was the master, the kingdom would have changed in size, in the political rulers might have changed, but the essential culture, the spiritual core of India was untouched. And Swamiji made a very important remark when he said, whenever anybody tried to touch the spiritual core, that political entity or that political power somehow vanished. It had to leave the country. Till then, it did not really matter whether the Mughals ruled or anybody ruled, as long as the Indian spiritual core was not touched. It is a great phenomena, and Swamiji, being a great student of history, points out that the moment the spiritual core, the religious core of India, the eternal values for which has made India survive for several centuries, the moment it was touched by any power, political power, whether it was the Buddhists or the any other uh, foreign power culture which came and tried to politically uh, rule over India, geographically, economically, politically, they could rule, but they could not subdue or suppress the spiritual core. That is the greatness, because it is based on eternal values, Sanatana values. And those values are important, not the geographical identity of India as a nation. But anyway, when Sister Nivedita wrote this book, or when she went to India to work for the welfare of Indian women, because Swami Vivekananda, though he did not believe in politics, but he believed that some kind of secular education, especially education of women, was necessary, because so that Indian people, could think for themselves in a mature way, keeping the spiritual core intact. He wanted the modern Western education, the benefits of modern secular education, the sciences should reach all the people, all the masses, and the women. These were the two important goals Swamiji asked Nivedita to fulfill. And she did it in her own way. She helped Swamiji in her own way for a few years, at least 10 years after the passing away of Swamiji. So she now tries to find out through her reminiscences, which was published as a book, The Master as I Saw Him, what was her opinion, or what was her appraisal of her own master, her own guru, and what did she gain by her contact with him. And this period, which she discusses in this chapter, is the period when he came to England for the second time, and he had decided to convey the message of the Vedanta or Upanishads, as he always said. He said, I preach only the Upanishads, but he wanted to create a small group, a small movement here. And he believed that if we put these universal ideas, which Sri Ramakrishna and his study and his living of the Vedantic principles taught him in life, he believed that these eternal principles would not only help India, but it would help the entire world to make this world a peaceful place, a meaningful place to live in. So he gave freely, as only to meet the expenses of the hall and the house that they had. They had a small fee they charged. but it was very, very nominal. Sometimes they did not charge. Most of the talks were free. And Sturdy and other friends ensured that uh, they did not, because Swamiji was against commercializing and he did not want to charge anything. He said knowledge should be free, it should be given free. Whenever you charge, but because the Western methods, the Western system was such that nobody would give you a hall in charity. You could not survive unless you charge. So in America, he realized for the first time that a small amount has to be collected by way of tickets so that that would pay for their expenses, which was the whole group who used to accompany Swamiji everywhere. Of course, they themselves contributed a lot, but still, Swamiji did not want to be a burden on them. So, some of the classes they used to have tickets, but very nominal. Even in by those day standards of those days, it was very nominal. Anyway, the talks that he gave in England during the second visit, especially in London. As I told you, there were two places, prominent places where he gave these talks. During the first visit, he was not so well known. So he began with parlor talks in St. George's Drive in Pimlico. But later on, he uh, spoke in a hired hall which could accommodate a large number of people, Victoria Street, where the present Boston Bank of Boston exists. That building is no more, but that street is still there, Victoria Street. So it was during his talks that he delivered in Victoria Street. He spoke about Jnana Yoga. Most of the talks were on Vedanta, the Jnana Yoga part of his lectures. There are other lectures. He delivered some lectures of Jnana Yoga in New York as well. So the present book which constitutes the Jnana Yoga lectures, most of the talks were delivered in London, and two or three of his talks on Maya and freedom, which he delivered on Victoria in this hall in Victoria Street, were recorded. And as we saw last time, that it was because of Goodwin and of course the other disciples, the women disciples who did so much. Josephine MacLeod, who introduced Goodwin, actually some of the women disciples in America. Goodwin, though he belonged to Ireland, he was traveling. He was in Australia. He was like a vagabond moving around. Though he had the skills, he never settled down everywhere. So his nature actually, when he was first employed, they gave an advertisement in England, in America, that they wanted a steno to record because they found that Swamiji's talks are so valuable that unless they are recorded, and to record those, you needed somebody who had a wonderful skill of shorthand, and they could take down the notes shorthand and they could reproduce it perfectly. So they found Goodwin, who was employed. In fact, he was paid a salary for 2 months. After that, he decided to follow Swamiji. He became a disciple, and he said, I can't be charging Swamiji because if Swamiji can give so much, Swami Vivekananda can give so much to the world free of cost, then how can I charge him? Let me help in some way in his mission. So Goodwin, the faithful Goodwin, as Swami Vivekananda called him, followed him all over the world, including the famous lectures he delivered in India. None of them would have been available to us today if Goodwin had not recorded them. So he came, he not only recorded, he edited, he helped Swamiji, typed the whole thing, washed his clothes, did a lot of seva of his guru, served his guru, wrote letters, corresponded, did a lot of work. He was a very, very enthusiastic young man. Of course, he died young, unfortunately, in India. But till the time he was with Swamiji, whatever Swamiji spoke, perhaps that was the Lord's will, that was Sri Ramakrishna's will, that these talks, of the hundreds of talks that he delivered, only these talks were preserved. The talks which he gave in England, the talks which he gave in New York and all over America and also in India, the talks that perhaps Sri Ramakrishna wished that should be preserved for posterity. And the complete works, the 9 volume of complete works which you have now, they constitute most of the talks are recordings other than the letters and the other reminiscences by other disciples. Except for them, most of the talks were recorded by Goodwin. Some of the newspaper reports, they might have been recorded by somebody else, but they were not, since they were newspaper reports, based on newspaper reports, perhaps the people who, the journalists who recorded them did not accurately record these talks. So the most authentic talks are the talks that Goodwin recorded, because he used to show them to Swamiji, and after Swamiji approved them, he used to type them, and then they were published as Jnana Yoga. Some of the books were published even while Swamiji was alive. So it is considered to be a very authentic source, because Swamiji would have definitely gone through all those manuscript before it was printed. So anyway, the second visit which Sister Nivedita remembers in 1896, when she was now, by this time, she was very well acquainted with Swamiji and his ideas. During the first visit, it was just, she was meeting Swami Vivekananda for the first time, and there was a sense of curiosity, but there are some wonderful ideas and his wonderful personality more than the ideas. She felt that it was through experience that Swami Vivekananda spoke. It was not just an intellectual talk that he gave. The talks that he gave, the parlor talks or the talks he gave in front of large audiences, was delivered from a high state of experience, from a high state of spiritual experience. Every time he spoke, he appeared to be possessed by a divine power, which she noticed. And she said it came from the heart, and most of the ideas were so original that Sister Nivedita was immediately impressed, not only impressed, but she decided to mold her life based on the teachings and the experiences of Swamiji, which were not only unique to her, but carried the force of conviction, a conviction based on spiritual experience. So, as Swamiji himself mentioned, Sister Nivedita says, he himself considered that his greatest intellectual achievement, though he says it is an intellectual achievement because he could put into words what he had experienced for the benefit of the entire world. So during this period, he said, Swami Vivekananda himself told Sister Nivedita that the greatest intellectual achievement that he accomplished during this period in 1896, during his work in London, in England, consisted in his lectures which he delivered on Maya. So those are the talks which he gave a lot of importance. So when we, in future, whenever we get a chance, perhaps we will take up, after we finish Raj Yoga, we might take up Jnana Yoga of Swami Vivekananda. So we can discuss these chapters. But here, Sister Nivedita gives us the gist of those lectures which he delivered on Maya. So Maya and freedom, Maya, the lecture on Maya. The idea of Maya was so confusing because Theosophical Society and other translations were definitely available. Not that Swamiji was teaching Vedanta for the first time. There were other efforts made by Annie Besant and the Theosophical Society to translate some of the Upanishads with Shankara's commentary. So they had somebody to translate these Sanskrit texts for them. But the translation which they did not give a clear idea of what Maya is. Maya was translated as illusion. Now, what is illusion? So Maya becomes something like a magic, like some kind of hypnotism. So that was the confusion. So Swami Vivekananda, Sister Nivedita says, it is only by reading these talks, Maya and illusion, Maya and freedom, the 3 or 4 talks that he gave. He says, only by reading these talks very carefully, an idea can be formed of the difficulty of the task he understood, to understand how difficult that task was, to convert these ideas which are there in Sanskrit, in our scriptures, in a language which was more suitable for secular achievement, scientific temperament. The achievements of English language was to prepare a vocabulary for most of the wonderful ideas of science, the material science, the physical sciences, and all the other sciences, uh, poetry, and some arts as well. But to express spiritual ideas, this English language, you had to use the correct word, the choicest words, because there are several words which could not be translated in a single word. One had to give a lot of explanation to translate these words. Many people translated Maya as illusion. Now, if you tell people that Maya means illusion, so they will think illusion is something, if you take it in a gross way, illusion is something like magic, some kind of illusion which a magician creates. But that is not what Maya is. So, the language, the wonderful sentences that he used to develop this idea and slowly created this idea of Maya. Sister Nivedita says, unless one reads it carefully, every line carefully, people will not realize how difficult it could have been. Now, of course, people borrow his phrases and print so many books. There are books by even Stephen Covey, and then there are other books which take many of these ideas of the Gita and the Upanishads, and because it has been translated, it has been spoken of in English language. That is why Swamiji says the task was so difficult to take these ideas, the core ideas of the spiritual literature of India, especially the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, to take them and explain them in a language which even a child can understand, a ignorant person can understand, is a very difficult task. Once it was done, now later on so many gurus and so many people came and used very freely of the vocabulary which Swamiji used. But Nivedita says, only if you read him carefully, you will understand how he for the first time explained these abstruse thoughts, very difficult thoughts, which were more often than not misinterpreted. For example, the idea of yoga. Yoga is one of the most misunderstood word. Unless we read the Raj Yoga of Swami Vivekananda, people will fail to understand what real yoga is. What do you mean by yoga? It has been trivialized to such an extent. So also the Jnana Yoga, the other yogas, tantras, you take up any subject, people have created a big mess by the wrong translation, because for people who do not understand Sanskrit, the only way they can understand these concepts is through the English language. And if the translation is not perfect, if it is not explained, if the explanation is based on some incomplete intellectual understanding, then there will be more confusion, and people will get a wrong idea of these great philosophy. So Swamiji says, or Sister Nivedita says, one can understand what a great difficult task he undertook. But for that, one has to read the lectures on Maya, which he delivered in London, very carefully. See, then she says, throughout the chapters in question, the chapters means the chapters on Jnana Yoga or the talks on Maya, which he delivered, she says, we feel we are in a presence of a struggle to express an idea which is clearly apprehended in a language which is not fit vehicle for it. He says, if you understand and if you try to read these talks, one will understand that we are witnessing a struggle by a mind of the highest capacity, not only capacity, intellectual capacity, but with experience. Unless one knows the real nature of Maya, one cannot express these things in words, not only in Sanskrit, but even in not leave alone English, even in Sanskrit, it is difficult to understand these concepts of Maya. So, to render the conception in modern English, it was a terrible task which Swamiji accomplished. And she says it was a struggle to express an idea which now is clearly apprehended. People can get a fair idea of what Maya and illusion is, provided he reads all these sentences and tries to understand it with lot of patience. She says, though he has written in a language which is not a proper vehicle to express these great ideas. So, the word, Sister Nivedita says, he is wrongly understood, says the Swami. It was Swami Vivekananda whom she is quoting. He says the word is wrongly understood, the word Maya is wrongly understood, says the Swami, to mean delusion. Now, originally, Swamiji says perhaps many people thought it was something like magic. But in some of the older texts of Vedas, perhaps people understood, translated the Max Muller and many other translations which were done on the Vedas. The Vedas were translated much before Swamiji came to England. So some of them were translated, published, sacred books of the East, the phenomenal work done by Max Muller in Oxford, where he got so many scholars to translate these works into English. And he managed to publish the sacred books of the East, including the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Rig Veda and all. So there they had to use these words like magic, because Indra through his Maya assumed various forms. Now, that is one of the sentences which will appear in the Rig Veda that is translated. So naturally, the idea of Maya here means that Indra comes in the form of different deities. So it means some kind of magic or illusion. But this meaning, Swamiji says, was subsequently dropped. The Upanishad said there is no magic involved. Maybe it's a crude idea, a lower idea. You see, that is the beauty of Indian scriptures, the Indian Vedas. There are ideas, primitive ideas, as well as there are the greatest ideas of the Upanishads. They are all side by side. So when you graduate, for example, when you are in kindergarten, you compose small sentences which appear to be very trivial to those who are studying masters or doing PhD. What a child understands is equally important, because at that age, if he had not studied that, he would not have made himself fit enough to understand, to do his degree or do his masters or do his PhD. You can't just throw away the fundamentals, the alphabets and the things which a child learns. So also the preliminary, the crude, or you can say the immature ideas of the earlier portion of the Vedas were all preserved, because they were revelations to lesser people. But when the rishis understood better and better and better, when their experiences changed, they recorded the highest experiences. So along with the highest experiences, just as it is done in every scripture, whether it's the Bible, Quran or Upanishads, everywhere you will find the highest thoughts existing, coexisting with the ordinary thoughts. So this meaning of Maya as illusion or magic was dropped in the Vedas itself. That is what Swamiji says. And the word went through many transformations till we get a clear idea of what Maya is and what it does to us. It's not just an intellectual curiosity with which we should approach this word Maya. If Maya is there, what of it? It is a term used to explain the world in Advait Vedanta. So as Advaitins or as Advait Vedantins or as just Vedantins, if we want to understand what this Maya is, and having understood this idea of Maya, if we don't apply it in our own life, then what is the use? A theoretical framework of Advait Vedanta is very good. It is a very nice thing to appreciate the great, wonderful philosophy of Advait Vedanta. But Swamiji said one cannot stop with that. One has to experience, otherwise there will be confusion. There will not only be confusion, the translations and the understanding of the great concepts of Maya and other things which are the core principles of Advaita Vedanta will be misunderstood. Not only they will be misunderstood, they will cease to be transformative in nature in our own life. We will be reading Advaita Vedanta, and at the same time we will be having all the joys of the world, and all the worldliness will remain in us. And at the same time we will be talking big Advaita Vedantic principles. So Advaita as a theory, Advaita as a practice. To understand Advaita as a practice, what Advaita really means, who are the people who can really practice Advaita Vedanta in one's own life and benefit from it. Those things Swamiji explained through his talks on Maya. So this Maya, the concept of Maya, which if we apply to our own life, after understanding it, obviously, Swamiji took so much pains to explain, not only explain, in fact, Sharat Chandra Chakravarti was again and again, though he was a great Sanskrit scholar, Swamiji was trying to explain to him in Bengali. And there was another disciple who once felt that when Swamiji was explaining, he could really feel, experience that the world was melting away. He was shocked because he never expected. He just thought Swamiji will give him some explanation which will satisfy his intellect. Because he was a scholar, he was knew Sanskrit, he knew Bengali. It was very easy for Swamiji to explain to him and convince him intellectually. It's so difficult to convince in an alien language, in a foreign language. But it was easier for Swamiji. So he thought perhaps Swamiji will give him. But not only did he give him a wonderful explanation of Maya, he says, when Swamiji was just speaking in his room in Belur Math, the disciple felt as if the walls and everything vanished. It really appeared as an illusion, the world, for a moment, for he got a glimpse of what that Maya is and what it means to us, and how it can strengthen your faith in Brahman, the pure consciousness, and how we can remain unaffected by the changes that we see in the world around us. So that is why, to understand all these things, Sister Nivedita says one has to read this carefully and hope that by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother or Swamiji himself, we can get a glimpse of what this Maya is. So a milestone, Sister Nivedita continues, in the series of conceptions, a milestone which she found in his all these talks and all the different ideas that he spoke in these 3 or 4 talks on Maya that he delivered. He says she found that there was a milestone that finally determined its core meaning of the word Maya was the text which he once translated. Swamiji freely translated some of the Sanskrit explanations which were given by Shankaracharya and other Advaitic Acharyas on the concept of Maya, because even those who know Sanskrit, they find it so difficult to get what actually Shankaracharya and the other Advaitic scholars and the Acharyas taught. So Swamiji explains to him by a beautiful translation which he is quoting from one of the talks on Maya he gave. He says, Swamiji says, these words are important, as Nivedita says. We have to understand every word, every sentence. We understand it, listen to it very carefully, and try to make some sense out of it. The more we listen, the more we try to understand, and the more we try to contemplate and meditate on what is being taught, then we may hope to get a faint glimpse of what this Maya is. So Swamiji once suddenly said, because we talk in vain, see what he says, because we talk in vain, and because we are satisfied with the things of the senses, and because we are running after desires, therefore, we, as it were, cover this reality that is Brahman with a mist. Now, let us repeat the sentence again. Because we talk, that is what Swamiji meant, that trying to understand intellectually or trying to discuss, listening to YouTube audios or videos on this concept is one thing. It is good, no doubt it is good. You have to make a beginning somewhere. But Advaita as an experience, Advaita as a philosophy is something different. It's very easy if somebody nicely explains to you, there are hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube which can give you a pretty decent understanding of the basic concepts of Advaita Vedanta. But Swamiji says in very powerful words, because we talk in vain. We, when he says we, he means everybody who has not experienced these truths. So one has to be very honest with themselves. With ourselves, we have to be very honest that are we talking in vain? Does it make sense in my own life? Does it reflect in my actions? Do I try to practice the things, the great ideas of Advaita Vedanta? That is why when somebody asks the Guru, if you read some of the basic text Prakarana Granthas of Advaita Vedanta, like Panchadashi, there are Vedanta Sara and all these great books, then the first thing that is discussed is, are you a Adhikari? Adhikari means, are you a candidate? Do you have that qualification to understand? So what are the qualifications? Now, if you listen at the qualifications, 99% of us, we are not fit. Because that is why Swamiji says, because we talk in vain, because we are satisfied with the things of the senses. If you are satisfied with the things of the senses, if you are running after the things of the senses, then perhaps we cannot understand this concept of Maya. And because we are running after desires, which we do, therefore we, as it were, cover this reality. So this reality we ourselves are covering with a mist. So this mist, the misty appearance that the world gives us, the world does not reveal its true nature to us because we are talking in vain, because we are satisfied with the things of the senses. When we outgrow them, we become adhikaris, we become fit. So that is why if somebody is told that if you can't expect to have a life totally immersed in the world, not just living in the world doesn't mean one is worldly. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, let the boat be in water, let not the water be in the boat. If the water is inside the boat, then it will sink. So we can live in the world provided we are not attached to it. Just like the boat is floating, we have to just float in this world, not be attached to it. The water, if it remains below the boat, it's fine. It doesn't drown the boat. But if we are satisfied with the things of the senses, if they are the consciousness of the is percolating through our senses, and we are running after madly running after our desires, then we have to ask seriously this question whether we are really adhikaris. Do we have the capacity to even understand intellectually Advaita Vedanta? We may listen to all the talks on the internet or read all the books that are available, but are we capable, according to this definition of Swamiji, which he says is the main cause of Maya, the covering of reality, which is the main topic of Advaita Vedanta, the pure consciousness, the pure Satchidananda, which is our true nature, which we have to realize by removing all the mist that is surrounding us. That is Maya. So Maya has been explained as a mist, which is a result of us talking intellectually, understanding intellectually these concepts, but still being attached to the senses, things of the senses, because we are running after desires. If all these things coexist, then the sadhana does not yield the desired results, and the mist still will cover reality, and we will not get a clear vision of what Brahman is. Finally, Sister Nivedita says the word Maya is seen to have assumed its ultimate meaning in the quotation from the Shvetashvatar Upanishad, which Swamiji, of course, he must have chanted those verses, but here she is giving the English translation because obviously they did not understand Sanskrit. So he says the ultimate meaning comes from a quotation from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, where nature itself is considered to be Maya. Prakriti or nature, know nature to be Maya, and the mind, the ruler of this Maya, as the Lord himself. The Maya of Vedanta, says Swamiji, in its latest development is simple statement of facts, what we are and what we see around us. Nobody had given a clearer definition than what Maya is. Now we make so much of nature, we make so much of Prakriti. We are so much impressed by Prakriti that it makes us run after it. We are running after the things of the senses, we are running after desires, we are covering this whole nature, we are covering Purusha reality by this Prakriti. That is what yoga attempts to do. What is yoga? Yoga says, come out of the clutches of Prakriti and realize your true nature as Purusha. So that Prakriti, know that nature itself is Maya. And the mind, which is the ruler of this Maya, as the Lord himself, means we have to use our minds. The mind is such a thing that it can bind you. Mana eva karanam bandhanam moksha, for bandhana as well as moksha. So mind is such a wonderful thing that it is the mind that binds us. Bandha mokshayo, bandha means bondage. Mana eva karanam bandha mokshayo means mind is the reason why we are bound, and mind is the very instrument through which we become free. So nature is Maya, and the mind, which is the ruler of this Maya, is the Lord himself. So the Lord himself, through the mind, through our buddhi, which is a enlightened mind, when the mind gets transformed into buddhi, the transformation, the mental transformation from a crude mind, a mind which is attached, mind can be attached to the desires, mind can be attached to the senses, then it destroys the mind. That mind becomes part of Prakriti. But the same mind, if it is directed towards Brahman or towards consciousness, it takes you away from, it takes you towards freedom. And this, the Lord himself, who is seated within our hearts, does this. So Swamiji says, he concludes by saying, it is the development, or it is a simple statement of facts, what we are and what we see around us. What we see around us, the different ironical things that we do, the attachments, the running after temporary things, transient things, thinking it to be permanent, it is a statement of fact. If I know something is temporary and I still think it is permanent and run after it, how can you explain that? How can we explain that? But it is a statement of facts. You can't say Maya is just illusion, because if it were illusion, then a wise person would have realized that as illusion. But considering nature to be real, he runs after nature, but that nature itself is an illusion, which covers our vision like a mist, which covers the real nature from us. We cannot see it because we talk in vain, because we run after the things of the senses, because we run after the desires. That's what Sister Nivedita says. But if they are a simple statement of facts, if Maya is so simple to understand, then why don't we realize it? It is one thing to understand the nature of Maya and say that it is a statement of facts, what we are and what we see around us. We think now and then, we get, especially when there is some pain that we feel. Sometimes nature seems to be very cruel. And in that moment, sometimes we get disgusted with nature. When nature is good to us, we are entangled in that and we are happy, thinking that is permanent. But the other side of nature, the harsh nature, the evil side of nature, when that comes, our strong likes and dislikes, they are disturbed. We like good things. We like good things to happen to us. We don't like bad things. We don't like evil things to happen to us. And our whole life is spent in trying to avoid the evil or avoid the bad things. And avoid the things that we don't like and run towards things that we like, thinking that these are permanent. This will give us permanent things. But after running, we find at a certain phase of our life that running after good things, running after things that we like, automatically implied that one day we will have to accept the things that we don't like. So joy comes with a crown of, there's an English proverb, happiness comes with the crown of sorrow on its head. There's great truth in this statement. It is a simple statement of fact, but that is what we observe. That is what Maya does to us, does to everybody, without any exception. And the only way to get rid of Maya is by the grace of God, or uh, by identifying ourselves with the spirit. So Shvetashvatara Upanishad, according to Swamiji, gives us the last word about Maya. Know this nature to be Maya. What do you mean? So Maya is the mind which is part of nature, and the ruler of the mind, that is the Lord himself. If we know him, then he may find out a way and not bind us through his Maya, which is nature. So though it is a statement of facts, we have to accept. Intellectually just saying yes, 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 it is a statement of fact. People say, oh yes, people quote, people even recite the Mahabharata when they say, yeah, Yudhishthira said, and we all appreciate, perhaps we even share on WhatsApp, that is the greatest surprise, that everybody, Yudhishthira told Yaksha, he said, you will all die. If you want your brothers to survive, you answer my questions. What is the most surprising thing of life? Then Yudhishthira says, he was very intelligent, he was a man of knowledge. So Yudhishthira says, every day people die, but they think they will live forever. This is Maya. This is a statement of fact, but can we deny it? We cannot deny it, because we are seeing it every day, it is happening. We are also part of that Maya, because as long as we are part of nature, and the sooner we try to use our mind and request the ruler of this Maya, the Lord himself, Maya Dhisha. Adhisha means one who rules over Maya. So only he is capable of taking us out from the clutches of Maya, from the clutches of Prakriti, from the statement of fact, which is a statement of fact, a simple statement of fact, that we are what we are. We know fire burns, but still we will put our finger into the fire. That is a statement of fact. You can't deny it, because it's happening all the time. We may talk about Vairagya, but at the same time we get attached. Swamiji gives some wonderful examples. We will discuss about that. And Sister Nivedita says, these few words which he explained, the Shvetashvatar, they are not intended as a definition of Maya. It will be seen by anyone who reads all the lectures of Maya for himself. So one has to read these 3 talks. If possible, I'll send the PDF on WhatsApp before we commence the next class on Master as I Saw Him. I hope and wish that all of you read these 3 talks, because they are very, very important. Whoever, if you have time, especially on weekends, why not spend a few minutes, a few hours? It may take hours, because there are 3 lectures, Maya and illusion, Maya and freedom, and all those things. So those 3 or 4 talks which are connected with each other, they are some of the best talks he delivered, and according to Swamiji, those were the most important talks that he delivered in London at that time, on Victoria Street. So unless one reads the all of the lectures on Maya for himself, Sister Nivedita says, we will not understand. A few definitions are not enough. Though Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Swamiji quotes that nature is Maya, but what do you mean by nature? What is Prakriti? How Prakriti affects us? How we are bound by Prakriti? All these things he has very clearly explained, given some beautiful examples from our day-to-day life, explaining the fact that Maya is a statement, simple statement of facts, which I, you, and everybody, the mother, the son, the relatives, everybody in this universe, though they understand that it is something confusing, something, some illusion or some mist that is covering us, but we still continue to be guided by that, by the simple statement of facts which we call as Maya. So, if there is, Sister Nivedita says, one has to read the whole lectures. These are just definitions, but unless you read all the lectures on Maya for himself, she says, will not get a clear understanding. Then she says, it is there evident that the word does not simply refer to the universe as known through the senses. See, there is one universe which we see around us through our sense organs. So, the word Maya does not refer only to this universe that we see through the senses, but it also describes the torturous, erroneous, and self-contradictory character of that knowledge. Means the things that we understand, it's not just the world that we see around us that is dangerous, or that is the Maya. That is the word Maya doesn't simply stand for nature. It also stands for our ignorance, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. There are these 5 kleshas. Patanjali explains in a different way. These kleshas color our mind, because we have strong likes and dislikes. We have fear of death because we think the wrong thing to be eternal. So the self-contradictory character of knowledge, the erroneous, the tortures that we have to undertake when we are leading this life, nobody can deny that. This life is a great torture. It may be good for some time for some people, but somehow or the other, along with the good things of nature, the evil things also come to us. None of us can avoid it. This is a statement of fact. But these incidents, these experiences which we experience through our senses are not the only things that cause Maya, that can be described as Maya. Maya can also mean the ignorance that we have, the clutter that we have in our mind, the lack of comprehension, of lack of clarity, or that we often possess when we try to understand this concept. That is also part of ignorance. It's not only the objects that around us. Objects are very gross, and even if we, for example, if we understand the transitory nature of this world, and we are content, that is why Holy Mother said contentment is a great virtue. So by some insight, wisdom, if we believe in the Holy Mother and we take contentment as a great virtue and follow it, then many of our issues will be solved. If you are content and are not swayed by our strong likes and dislikes and abhinivesha, that is, and the vidya, asmita, our ego, all these things, if are more or less a little under control, then we will find that our life becomes a little more, you may say, stable. It becomes a little more stable, because these it goes into a state of yoga. Yoga has been defined by removing these kleshas, by removing the strong likes and dislikes, and the confusion, the erroneous and the self-contradictory nature of this world. By developing an insight into that, some of us, for some time at least, even if we understand that what we see around us is not, everything is not going to remain or going to give us happiness all the time. We have to be prepared for the other side. If we have strong likes, we will get what we like for some time of our life, but we will also, along with that, get some of the things which we don't like. So raga will be accompanied by dvesha. We'll be hating certain things, we'll be liking certain things, and our life will be just nothing but a struggle to always imagine that we will always get the things that we like, and we will be able to somehow avoid the things that we don't like. And the fear of death, of course, is there, which we don't even think about. So these three things keep on creating situations which Swamiji defines as Maya, or a simple statement of facts. So this statement of fact is not a theory, says Swamiji. He says it is like a Tantalus hell. Tantalus, I don't know whether you know that Greek story. Tantalus was a person who was cursed by God, they say, by Satan, and he was given a punishment because of his evil deeds. What was the punishment? Tantalus had to uh, roll a stone, a very big stone, up the hill. He was told that if you roll the whole stone and keep it on the top, then your punishment is over. Till then, you have to do it. So this poor Tantalus started rolling the stone, and he did a very good job. He was a very strong, though he was evil, he was a strong person. So he just rolled that stone, and just when he was about to reach the top, if he had reached the top, that would have ended his trouble, and he would have been freed from that curse. But somehow or the other, the moment he went up, he got exhausted, and somehow it slipped and it went down. The condition was that he has to again try. So they say Tantalus is eternally, it is a kind of hell when you are rolling that stone and thinking that you will reach the goal, and it never reaches the goal. The stone falls down, you come back again, sweat it out. That is what the world is. Swamiji says that is how the world is. We get blows again and again, we understand. We don't learn lessons from the bitter experiences of life. So Tantalus knew this, that if I am not careful, it will fall down again. And then we go about the same duty we'll do, push that stone, thinking that, oh, this time I will uh, take the stone and I will perhaps, that will be the end of my trouble. But no, it will slip down. So that Swamiji says we do not know anything about this universe, about this Prakriti, and yet at the same time we cannot say that we do not know. We know. Something tells us what you are doing is wrong. What is Vairagya? What is, we know. He says to walk in the midst of a dream, half sleeping, half waking, passing all our lives in a haze. This is the fate of every one of us. This is the fate of all sense knowledge. This is the universe. So see the words Swamiji is using, that we cannot say for sure that we have understood the complex nature of this Prakriti. It is like living in a dream. A dream is true when we are dreaming, but when we are half asleep, half awake, dream doesn't come when we are totally asleep. When we are fully asleep, when we are in deep sushupti, we don't get dreams. But when we are half asleep, in that state we dream. So Swamiji says our life is like that. We are passing our lives in this haze, this confusion, this mist which is known as Maya. And that is because we are all, that is the fate of all the sense knowledge. The more gross we are, the more bound by Prakriti we are, the more we are bound by this universe. And this is a statement of fact. So Swamiji gives the first explanation of Maya. He's saying, I'll repeat it again, that it is like a statement of fact. It is not a theory. Maya, if you try to understand Maya as a theory, because Shankaracharya or somebody else, the Advait Vedantins, use the word Maya. I would like to know what Maya is. Maybe I read a few talks and listen to some. But unless we read Swamiji's talks on Maya, because he had this experience during in his own life, he had to face so many difficulties. So perhaps that was Thakur's way of teaching him what Maya was. Blow after blow came in his life. His father died, his parents were about to be thrown out of his house. So all this suffering opened certain layers of his personality. Perhaps that was God's grace, we can say. And when the layers of haze, the mist that is normally not allowing us to find out the truth, this universe is nothing but Maya according to Swamiji. That Tantalus hell, we were rolling the stones again and again, hoping after hope. We keep on hoping that one day we will keep that stone on the top and that will be the end of our troubles. But we do not know that when we are just about to finish our job, the stone falls down and again we have to start the process. So it is like a Tantalus hell. It's these myths, these Greek myths are not simple stories. They are also in their own way trying to explain what Maya is. Take any religion, the Bible, the Quran, and all those things. They point out to certain eternal values and tell us not to succumb to these lower values. So we should not be passing our lives in a haze. This is the fate of every one of us. This is the fate of sense knowledge, and this is the universe, and this is Maya. So this is a broad definition of Maya. I will, as I told you, I will post these 3 talks which Swamiji delivered. If you can make sense out of it, please try to read it so that in the next class we can discuss it in great detail. Now, if there are some questions, you please quickly ask. Yes. If there are no questions, I'll conclude. But it is my request that you read what I'll try to read, at least some of the talks, if not all. I think there are 3. So I'll be posting it on the WhatsApp group. So these 3 talks on Maya, how beautifully Swamiji has explained these 3 talks. Through these 3 talks, the concept, the most difficult concept, but the most fundamental concept, because of that, all our suffering is because of our the self-contradictory knowledge that we possess, the erroneous avidya or asmita. That ego comes from avidya. From avidya, as we saw, first there is avidya, that ignorance, which is nothing but the mist of Maya that surrounds us, and because of that it gives rise to ego according to Patanjali, and then likes, dislikes, raga, dvesha, and fear of death. So no doubt they are very easy to explain or easy to understand, though they are not as easy as Swamiji will explain in the 3 talks. But even if we understand, to understand its implication and apply it in our own life, so that we can transform, be a little more peaceful than what we were before. Even a little understanding, as Gita, Krishna says in the Gita, Swalpa apyasya dharmasya, a little of this religion, a little understanding of this also will remove great fear. True religion, I mean, not anything, not any intellectual idea which may not be valid, but only those written by people who have experienced these truths. That's why we have to be very careful as to what we should read. There are so many things available now, not only through books but through social media. One has to be very, very, very careful, so that we go to the core, go to the people whom we have faith and whom we know have realized something in their lives. So that's why Swamiji points out in the Raj Yoga, time is short, don't waste it by reading, even by reading good books, which may not be accurate, which may not be based on spiritual experiences. One has to exercise a lot of caution and not succumb to that. We like variety. We want to hear so many things. It has become like a fashion to hear all these things. There are so many things, so many things. We just want to pass our time, but we don't realize that if there is any error in that, if there is some contradiction in that message, or if it is not only incomprehensible, but if it is wrong, then it may ruin our life. So one has to be very careful. That is why we have to stick to people who, the teachings or the words of people who have realized this truth in their lives. Okay. What can we are perverse that we like the mist? Yes, perversity is nothing but ignorance. We are perverse because we think the mist appears to us as truth. We don't realize it is a mist. That is because of our perversity. What can we do if we are aware of the transitory nature of things, but we still get trapped in old memories? Pondering if we did the right thing or not, it's hard to control, even if we are aware that it is Maya. Yes, it is a very good question. We are trapped in old memories. That is what the Patanjali's yoga deals with. It says that though we are convinced, still till the samskaras, till the old memories, which are smritis, they are burnt. They have to be, because they have a tendency to again bubble into thoughts. So it's a very tough task. Even if we know 100 times, if we repeat to ourselves that this is Maya, this is not good, but we have to do it 101 times. If even after doing 100 times, if they are not going, these ideas are not going, the transitory nature of things is not convincing us, we have to do it once more till it convinces us, till all the samskaras are burnt. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, because the samskaras are so deep rooted. The moment, it is like when we see there are so many weeds, we cut the weeds, and after a few days, you see, because we have not removed them, we have not burnt them, the weeds again reappear. So it's an eternal process. It's a very tedious process to burn the samskaras. That is what yoga is all about. Whether it is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, or Jnana Yoga, all these Raj Yoga, all are meant to burn the old samskaras. So even if we are aware that it is Maya, uh, we these old samskaras have a tendency to again bubble up. So avidya has to be removed. Raga, dvesha, these kleshas can be handled. We can have a comparatively controlled life by not being totally moved by these likes and dislikes. Okay, we give up strong likes and dislikes. We are very stable in our life, taking things, not hoping that things should happen this way or that way, and gain some kind of stability. Even then the samskaras, the hidden samskaras, which we are not aware of, they may come up anytime. So you have to ensure that the whole samskaras are destroyed. Yeah. Swamiji, how to distinguish between what's Maya and what is Swadharma? Yes, Swadharma is that which takes you away from Maya. The idea of Swadharma was, Swadharma means it is a tool to perform Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is what leads us away from Maya. So when we consider something as our Swadharma, and if we do it in a detached way, then we are not attached to Prakriti. We are working out our karma. So it is not very difficult. If we choose a profession, that becomes our Swadharma. So it's not what profession you do. Even the butcher who was selling meat for a living, he was a Jnani, because he knew that was his Swadharma. He had to do it, though it was an unpleasant task. He had no choice because he was born in a butcher's family, and perhaps he knew no other trade. So he was selling meat. And one of the yogis goes to him and he finds that he is full of wisdom, he's full of the knowledge of Brahman. So it's not what you do that is important. Swadharma is something, there is a huge difference between Sadharma and Maya. That Maya does not always come in the form of Swadharma. If you know Swadharma as Swadharma, then it is not Maya. But the thing is, we take Swadharma, in the name of Swadharma, we do Vidharma or somebody else's Dharma or something which is not Dharma, Adharma. So, in that case, to identify what is the true Swadharma becomes very important. And having identified it, not allowing it to dictate your life or get attached to what you are doing, and doing it without likes or dislikes, just accepting things as they come, in life and doing our duties. That is the real essence of Karma Yoga. So that is what Bhagavan Sri Krishna is teaching Arjuna, that you go on doing your duty. You don't bother whether you will win or lose. You may win, you may lose. You many things can happen to you, but let that not affect you. This is your Swadharma, just go on doing it. As you go on doing it, the control that Maya has, the ignorance has over you, that becomes less and less. That is one way. Karma Yoga is one way of reducing the impulse of old memories and the old samskaras. So yoga has to be used in that way. Now there is one more question. You mentioned the butcher is vegetarianism still important? Like how you mentioned avoiding strong likes and likes, but it's good idea to be slightly off put by tamasic things. Yes, tamasic things, you see, the thing is, everybody, the one who is in the spiritual path, he has to, in the initial stages, avoid tamas if it disturbs his mind. But you see, these gross things do not affect a person. That is why too much importance is not given to food. Vegetarianism, a vegetarian also can be a very, very, very worldly person. If a person who is vegetarian but is attached to wealth, it is attached to woman and gold, as Thakur said, you may be eating Havishyana, a person may be eating Havishyana, but he is attached to something else. He may not be attached to meat or non-vegetarian food, but he may be attached, inordinately attached to wealth and other things, bad things in life. So he may be addicted to that. So there is no guarantee that eating a certain kind of food will, as a general rule, of course, people have to avoid tamasic food, that if they really find that it affects them. Tamasic food, for certain people, certain foods are tamasic. For certain other people, depending on their constitution. So vegetarianism is not a very big issue in this. And this Dharma Vyadha, it is there in the Mahabharata. He was doing it as a profession. That doesn't mean that he was inordinately attached to eating meat. He may not have been a glutton. He may lead a very simple life. But because there are a lot of people in society who eat meat, he was taking it up as a profession. There are soldiers. Soldier killing may not be a good idea. But if there are evil people, you need the police, you need the soldiers to defend yourself. So this world is a contradiction, no doubt. But to see through that contradiction is what is Maya. To understand it as Maya, it has nothing to do with good or evil. Good and evil will always coexist. And one has to recognize one's Swadharma and behave accordingly in one's own interest to get rid of the bondage that is caused by this Prakriti. That is the essential thing. Not what you eat, what you wear, what you do. These are external things. Once you raise your mind above that, then these things are of very little consequence. What you eat, whether you fast, whether you eat, these things are important when one is at the beginning of one's spiritual life. Obviously, that Vyadha was a man of knowledge. His mind was on a much higher plane, but what he did, the physical things were not so important. But if a person is a vegetarian person, but is attached to so many physical things, is attached to people, is attached to money, is attached to so many things, name and fame, then he is more worldly than this person who is perhaps eating non-vegetarian food. So we'll conclude today. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.